Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Gungans and droids, and all of my fellow Imperialites that are maybe playing a mobile game on a little bit of a budget. We're going to be talking about the top 10 plus an additional one. Best not Omicron, low gear, free-to-play teams so you can dominate your opponents. This is one of those things where we're all on a farming path, but I want to pick out some teams that, although you might be farming for, let's say, Jedi Master Luke, General Anakin Skywalker, Darth, whatever it might be, I want to give you some side projects that don't need to go all the way to gear 13 to get the maximum bang for buck out of them. I want to give you guys some low gear, heavy firepower, and some teams that might only need like one good geared character and the rest is just massive cheese. Hopefully it's going to be a helpful free-to-play oriented video to get the most out of your roster and get additional teams that might be sitting in your roster, because at times you might have gear for a full faction and maybe get it up to gear 9, and sometimes that's all you need. So let's go and get right into it. First team that I'm putting on this list, it should have been a no-brainer for all you guys. Imperial Troopers, General Veersley. Now, don't be fooled by my free-to-play account where I have 2 Relic 5 characters, and I recently just took my Dark Trooper to gear 12. For example, I just had my Dark Trooper to gear 9 for months, easily at least 1 year minimum. And due to the fact that Imperial Troopers have some fairly fast characters, Moff Gideon or Piet, and they can outrun the opponent most times, even under gear 12, once they start getting rolling, all those buffs, Emperor's Trap starts going, the team is just an unstoppable train. I've taken on Relic 7 Darth Malaks with low gear troopers, and once that Emperor's Trap gets into the 30s, 40s, 50s, you're hitting pretty hard, even at low gear. The main downside is going to be with characters under gear 12, you can't put 6-stop mods on them. So you are going to hit a speed ceiling that is not going to be as high as you want it to be, but even with Moff getting at low gear, you can feasibly get the guys close to 300 as possible, and especially at the lower divisions of Grand Arena, you're probably going to come across a lot of teams that are nowhere near the 300. So Imperial Troopers, in my book, it's one of the best bang for buck, non-legendary, and truly, you only need 1, maybe 2 Zetas on the team. 1 on General Veers, 1 on Admiral Pitt's unique ability, and you're kind of golden at that point. Moving on, let's stay on top of the Imperial Trooper madness. Iden Versio. Now, this is the team that I really don't have much on. It's mostly gear 7, 8, and maybe a 9 in there. And I do have a Stark at gear Relic 3 for my Synthatiger requirements. You would be blown away by how much this team can do at low gear. And it really just comes to the fact that Iden Versio is able to start the battle off right away, increase the durability on your team, counterattacks, and just having that 1 gear 13 on, you're going to get that nice assist and clean out a lot of teams. I am surprised by how many defensive holds I've gotten for this team on defense, and it's better than just placing some random trash. It's a low gear team with only 1 Zeta on them that I need on Iden Versio, and it's getting me free defensive wins at times. Again, massive punch-up team that probably a little too good to be true, and I think it really helps that they have lots of revive capabilities, and it's really hard to kill off Iden if all the other troopers are sticking around. But let's move on to a different set of troopers that I hold near and dear to my heart. And this is one I want to get up and running myself very shortly, and that's going to be the Bad Batch. This is one that I know I'm missing out on. I need to take my own advice sometimes. I feel like I'm sitting on this team and not utilizing them. Even at low gear, they are a little bit more Zeta heavy, but once you got like 2-3 Zetas on them, you're kind of rocking and rolling at that point. Even before you start applying the absurd amount of Chirotech, these guys can punch incredibly high, because again, one thing you want at low gear is, do you have someone that's fast and can get you chugging along, and do you have something to compensate for the damage? You know, Imperial Troopers, you have Emperor's Trap. With Iden, it's the initial turn that she gets, as well as adapt or die revive mechanisms. With the Bad Batch Echo is able to outrun a lot of teams because he's got a high speed that he's working with, able to yank off the buffs, get the days going, and then start feeding, supercharging the turn meter on your team. And even at low gear, they have decent durability because of all the extra durability, health protection increases that are on the team, and they compensate for their low gear with the damage, because once you got that defense up, you're doing extra damage, true damage to the enemy. So you're going to churn through a lot of teams. You'd be surprised how many gear 13 General Grievous teams you can churn through because of the big opening play from Echo, and then just getting that daze on him and letting the true damage work its wonders. This is one team I need to take for myself. I know they're a Cairo heavy team when you get into the gear 12, gear 13s, but you can definitely get them up to the point right before you start needing Chirotechs, and you're going to get a lot of mileage out of these fellas here. Coming in at number 4, I'm putting Genosians on the list. Now, I said number 4. There is no particular order to this list here. Keep that in mind. We can debate which one's 1, 2, 3, or 4. They're all great, but I do think Genosians, they're not maybe the best on the list here if I did have to rank them individually. But the great thing about Genosians is, one, you need it for Wat Tambor, a variety of Geonosis territory battle stuff. But these guys, they can take their low numbers and act at a higher gear level. So for example, my Genos, besides Genosian Brood and Genosian Spy, they're mostly at like gear 8, gear 9, but when you're combining all of their stats together, they're kind of, in a sense, functioning at like a gear 13 of a normal character. The durability is incredibly high in this team. And then with Genos and Spy, you're able to get that damage out there. So this is one of those teams where you're not going to get a ton of mileage at mega low gear like Bad Batch or Imperial Troopers or Iden, but if you can at least get like maybe your Spy to a decent gear level, and the good thing is you don't need Chirotechs on these Genosians to get up to gear 12. So that's a really important thing. So you might be able to accrue gear naturally, and that's how it was for me. Over time, I just noticed I could just start applying gear that's sitting around. It's an investment that's not going to go to waste. Genosians lose their end game viability, but still at the early game, the mid game, they're getting a lot of bang for buck just simply because they're combining their health and protection into something incredibly durable. Next up here, a personal mega favorite of mine. And this is really showing the low gear viability. Obviously, it looks a little bit higher geared because I have Relic 7s on them, but I didn't have that all the time. I only have that now because I was working towards Sith Eternal, but really it comes down to that little low gear of Mara Jade. When she's fast, that's one thing that's really working in her favor. And once she starts getting that tenacity down, the shock, the stagger, the Palpatine train just keeps on going and going and going, kind of at the point where you don't even need Darth Vader, but Darth Vader pretty much all but he just seals the deal to make it happen. And the best part about it is too, since you have Mara Jade or someone to get her going, to get that turn meter rolling, and once Palpatine's got that turn meter rolling, it's very hard to stop the train. But if you're in Territory Wars and you slap on the Omicron, this team just becomes a god tier team with Mara Jade opening up the battle with 100% turn meter, getting the train rolling. I honestly, you're gonna put me in a hard pressed position finding a character that's better at low gear than her. She is one of the ultimate low gear characters. If you have Palpatine, get her up and running. Yeah, she's not needed for Sith Eternal, but even myself, I was using her 3 stars gear 9 for months, at least a year at this point, since she came out last year in 2021. I have never a day regretted it. And some days I'm like, why do I even need this character at a higher gear level? And the only reasoning is when you get the gear 12, gear 13, she's going to get access to 6-step mods, and there's gear pieces that increase her speed, which is kind of helpful. So that's the reason to gear her up. But in the meantime, you're going to get a lot of work out of the gal. Bounty hunters. Now, bounty hunters, I would say they are good at low gear. Maybe not as good as low gear as some of the other guys like Imperial Troopers and Palpatine, because they have a perpetual turn meter train that pretty much rolls once it gets going. Bounty hunters, I prefer Bosk at lower gear, because when you get Bosk increasing the durability of the team, that's when you can start pulling some heavy punches. And I'd be able to beat, for example, General Grievous teams with my bounty hunters that I often quite see, or some other gear 12-ish teams that lay around here. And it does help that I do have a gear 12 Bosk. Again, it's helpful that it doesn't need Chirotechs to get the gear 12, so I can at least have a decent tank. And when Bosk starts taunting, it's really hard to get around the guy and hard to put him down unless you got a serious heavy fire attacker going straight into Bosk. Otherwise, this is really important. Mandalorian, I have like no Zetas on this team except on Bosk, but Mandalorian is what honestly makes this team viable at low gear, because once you get that contract off, you're insta-killing, and it doesn't matter how high of a relic you have. My gear 8, 9 Mando, whatever it is, it's gonna destroy them. So that's really what it is, having a decent tank of Bosk, and then just having Mandalorian get the insta-kill, and I'm really excited to get that team to a little bit of a higher gear level. But again, it's one of those teams that's kind of a budget team, sitting around, didn't cost me a lot of gear, and it's pulled out a ton of wins that I needed, because I don't want to use a big team. I want to use a team that can punch up above their weight. That's the bounty hunters for you there. All right, speaking of General Grievous, we talked a lot about General Grievous. This one's going to be interesting, and hold on for a moment. When I say General Grievous, you're probably thinking B2, B1, the normal separatist gang. I'm going to change your mind for a bit. With Grievous, I do admit you kind of want to get him to gear 12, preferably gear 13. This is going to be kind of one of those teams that maybe not like Imperial Troopers, Bad Batch, where you're working with low gear and you're fine. You kind of want to get Grievous to a good gear level, and then just put a bunch of trash droids around him, give Grievous Metalloid monstrosity, and as all these droids are falling down, Grievous is getting a ton of bonus turns, I promise you, especially the lower mid divisions, if you have General Grievous with Metalloid Monstrosity and just droids are falling off, you're gonna get defensive holds because sometimes it's hard for enemies to figure out how to get the Grievous when droids are dying one by one and Grievous gets bonus turns. So this is one of those teams, maybe not a mega low gear team, but if you can at least get a good gear level on Grievous, throw on the Zeta, put in whatever droids you have left over, you're gonna get a lot of just defensive holds just from Grievous stripping away banners and taking a ton of bonus turns before they finally have the opportunity to gun the guy down. Mon Mothman, kind of in that class of Mara, Jade, Iden, Versio, all that fun stuff, especially if Kyle Katarn, that's really what the main engine driver is. This is a team that gets a lot of initial turn meter boost through Kyle Katarn, and then if you can, that is the most important thing, if you can get Kyle Katarn to get out there first, start rolling, and you have Hoth Rebel Scout. Once you have Hoth Rebel Scout assisting, you're going to start feeding a steady stream of turn meter, and maybe not as consistent and guaranteed of a turn meter loop perpetual situation like the Imperial Troopers. You're going to be in a fairly good range of just constantly outrunning your opponent, and if you're taking a ton of turns and they aren't, well, you're going to kind of win in a turn-based game when you're getting more turns up against them. So this was a little bit more challenging because you need a Kyle Katarn that can get that extra Rebel fighter speed through the unique ability, and you got to have Hoth Rebel Scout, which you're likely going to get for free through the Bronzium packs and whatnot, and just make sure you got that basic setup so when they assist, they're feeding Terminator to the team, and of course Mon Moth was needed to tie the full Rebel fighter team together here. And we're coming down closer to the bottom of the list. Jedi Training Ray. Now you might be like, oh, that's kind of random, but hear me out. Jedi Training Ray, we don't hear a ton of nowadays, but at the lower divisions, especially when you have BB-8, R2, and then they're going to get a bunch of turn meter at the start of the battle. Then you have Resistance Hero Poe and Finn that have some decent speeds even before Gear 12. If you can get them going, meaning you can, at least survive the opening hits or outrun your opponents, once you got the exposes going on the enemy team, you have so much turn meter manipulation, increasing your turn meter, reducing the enemy team's turn meter, and you can pretty much start rolling enemies. Again, maybe not as good as some other stuff out there, but still, you'd be surprised. Although we don't talk much about Jedi Training Ray, at the early mid game, if you can't figure out how to control her when she's on defense, or if you can get her rolling, with especially the Finn brothers, with the Resistance Hero Foe and Resistance Hero Finn, you're going to be smashing a lot of fools with all that exposed synergy baked into the team. And it really just helps out that BB-8 gets a ton of turn meter on that unique ability when there's more droids on the team. 2 more teams left. Technically, this one is number 10 before I get to the bonus one. So far, no Omicron for all these guys, because Omicron is kind of a good degree of investability, if that's even a word right there. I want to kind of show you teams that you might just have sitting around that you need to get up to at least some sort of minimum gear 9, 8, 10 level, maybe even 11 if your roster affords it. But Night Sis, I'm putting on this list. This one is kind of like Grievous. You need at least one character geared up, and that's Daka. If you have a good Daka, preferably at like Relic or something, I mean, obviously more Relic's better, but when she's in the Relic levels, she could survive. And if she survives, you can keep reviving the Night Sisters and can stun lock the enemy, get the plague going, hopefully roll on them. And if someone falls, you just revive them and you keep it going. It's mega cheese, and you do need a good Daka, but it's, again, one of those things that you're probably getting a lot of shards for. I mean, look how many shards of Night Sister Zombie I have just from doing the normal event that shows up now and again. For Night Sister Zombie and Night Sister Spirit, you probably have them laying around. These guys do not need Kyrotex to get up to gear 11, gear 12 if you go up that far, and you might be able to snap a few wins, and it could cause people annoyances. But generally nowadays, with the popularity of Imperial Troopers, as well as Bad Batch, as well as Emperor Palpatine, they're not the best defensive team, even at end, mid, and early game. A lot of ways to beat them, but a lot of ways to cheese your way on an offensive victory. And finally, bonus one, number 11 that I have here, QuiGon Jinn Omicron. I mean, look how stupid and cheesy this is. QuiGon Omicron, I have like no gear on him. But once you slap on that Omicron and you just put QuiGon and a bunch of like garbage Galactic Republic Jedi on the team, Jedi Knight Anakin, especially if you're pushing for Sith Eternal, you're going to have the guy at Relic 7. It's almost like a free win at times. If someone's coming in, they don't know how to control the Anakin cheese that's about to happen. When a Jedi dies, or Qui-Gon dies especially, and all the stats get boosted on Anakin, he's going to one-shot teams. I've got a nice steady stream of defensive wins where they kill off Qui-Gon, Anakin pops off, gets me a defensive win, and they come in for an easy cleanup. But sometimes that extra defensive hold is all that you need. And of course, the more you invest in Qui-Gon, the more powerful your Jedi Anakin's going to be when Qui-Gon dies up. But from my experience being in Chromium right now, I'm getting random defensive wins because it is kind of annoying. It's cheesy. Just sneezing on Qui-Gon is going to make Anakin pop. So it's really hard to set yourselves up when that's happening. And ladies and gentlemen, Gungans and Droids, I honestly think this is kind of the definitive list of low gear teams that don't need Omicrons for the most part. That's going to get you incredible bang for buck. And I consider maybe putting Jedi Revan and Darth Revan in, but I feel like they definitely need some good gear levels to really get something going because they don't have a turn meter train situation. A lot of these teams either have incredible durability, incredible opening plays, incredible turn meter loop, or mega cheese capabilities. And that's the team I think, no matter what you're farming for, I do recommend on the side, you kind of build up a few of these teams and you're going to notice you're going to have a lot more flexibility to beat a lot of teams out there. So thank you so much for stopping by. Leave that like, comment down below. Maybe there's a team that should have been on this list. Maybe it should have been a top 12 or 15 list. Would love to hear your thoughts. And as always, until we meet again, always remember, it's great to be in the Empire today.